Dear respected Thay, dear friends, can you hear? So welcome back to our class on the 40 Tenets of Plum Village. Today is the 12th of May in the year 2021. And we're in the Ocean of Peace Meditation Hall of Deer Park Monastery during our spring retreat. It's very helpful to believe in the transformative power of the Dharma. And that belief doesn't have to come from some kind of blind faith, but it can come just from being aware of our breathing. Breathing in, I know I'm breathing in. Breathing out, I know I'm breathing out. In, out. Just being aware of the in-breath as it comes in through my nostrils, my mouth, and breathing out, my belly falling, the air moving up, out through my nose and mouth. Breathing in, I'm aware of the impermanent nature of my breathing. I cannot grasp onto the breath. As it comes in, as it comes out, I relax my shoulders, relax my whole body. Wherever I'm seated, watching this on the computer, I can just close my eyes and allow the concentration on the breathing to manifest. Open our eyes. Just taking a moment like that, seeing the impermanent nature of the breath, that we cannot hold on to it, and the calm that comes with that realization is already enough evidence for me to know that there's a transformative effect of the Dharma. And there are so many other doors. There's the taking a mindful step, being aware of the contact our foot makes with the earth, coordinate. There's being aware of the food that we're eating, being the sun, the rain, the earth, the farmer, all the elements that make up that food. And seeing that we also are made of the sun, the rain, the earth, and our parents, and our ancestors. And by seeing that the interbeing nature of us and the food. If we remove any of those elements from the food, they can no longer manifest. And the same is true of us. If we remove any of those non-us elements from our body, our feelings, our perceptions, then we can no longer manifest. So that is the nature of manifestation. Things manifest due to causes and conditions. So all of these, meditation on the breath, the walking meditation, meditation on our eating, are like doorways into the Dharma. They allow us to free ourselves from the habitual way of grasping at signs and phenomena. And just feeling the bliss, the calm, the ease that comes with that realization gives us faith, gives us confidence. That is the beautiful nature of the Dharma. It doesn't require you to believe something that's difficult to believe. You practice, you get some freedom, you get some ease, and then you want more. So you continue to practice. That is the spirit of belief in the Buddhist tradition. And it means that freedom is possible, happiness is possible. That is a kind of belief that is very helpful to have. So that when there are moments of overwhelming sadness, despair, anger, grief, we know there's a path. So we don't fear that anger. We don't fear our own despair. But we know how to take care of it. We know how to take care of it just like we take care of our breathing, like we take care of our eating, like we take care of our walking. It's there. And we can use it as an object of our meditation, that despair, that anger. And see that it is impermanent. It is not something that we can grasp. So it's kind of, Thay often described it as unblocking our mind. That we have blocks of suffering in us. And this meditation on impermanence, letting go of grasping, is a way to kind of massage those blocks of suffering so we don't continue to engage in the kind of grasping and habitual stimulation of seeds of afflictions in our consciousness. We let go, we allow it to relax. And so when many people come on a retreat for the first time, they feel a lot of exhaustion. Oh gosh, I came on a retreat, I thought I would get energy, but why did I feel so tired? And that's because there's something that's stuck in their daily way of living, in their mind. And so when they come to the monastery, it's able to get a kind of a break. You don't continue to reinforce that block of suffering, but you allow it to kind of break up in chunks, like an iceberg that's melting, and it starts to flow. So the frozen river, it starts to flow, and it's no longer blocked. And then that flowing is, oh my gosh, so many things are going on inside. I feel exhausted. I have to sleep 9 hours, 10 hours. And that happens to many, many people who come on our retreats, because they don't recognize how in their daily life they are continuing to create this kind of blockage. And so all of these tenets that we're learning are helping us to release that block of suffering, and to discover new ones that are there, hidden, like trauma that's in the body itself. Not continuing to avoid it, but rather bringing that awareness to it and allowing it to relax. And that is the beauty of the Dhamma. It's the beauty of this practice. So I highly encourage you to believe in the possibility of freedom. To believe that happiness is possible. To touch that inspiration, to know that there is a path. And that can help in moments of great difficulty. But the better way to practice is to actually touch that happiness right here and right now. There's nowhere to go, nothing to do. Sometimes we feel so much suffering, we think, I just need to have something to believe in. And I think it's a pity that if we just say, no, I'm a Buddhist, I don't believe in anything, we can be a kind of become an extreme skeptic. And I don't believe in the Four Noble Truths, I don't believe in awakening, I don't believe in all of these things. And ultimately, we may end up in a very dark place. We try to reduce everything to a rational understanding, We think the Buddha is just a scientist pouring chemicals from a beaker to another beaker, and we forget entirely the possibility of awakening in the present moment, and to not fear as well, allowing ourselves to be happy, allowing ourselves to be free. Recognizing that those forces that are driving us to run, the fear instilled in us from a young age that we are not doing enough, we're not working enough, we're not intelligent enough, we're not smart enough, we're not beautiful enough, we're not promoting ourselves enough, we're not whatever enough, is actually hiding there and is driving us to this kind of activity, which is not allowing us to be happy, not allowing us to stop and be free in the present moment. I know because I have that energy in myself, and I've spent many years embracing it, and I know it's still there. We often, in the tradition, they say that restlessness is one of the last things to completely disappear before full awakening. And not to get caught in ideas of full awakening or not, but it's a very helpful, I found it very helpful to remember that even as a committed practitioner, something somehow is still, I want to go somewhere else. Thay, our teacher, described it like the attainment of removing our restlessness. He called it froglessness. So I think there's an expression in Vietnam, right? You put a frog on the plate and then it jumps off. You put it back on the plate, it jumps off again. And so one of the attainments of Plum Village is that we are able to remove the frog in us, which always wants to jump off the plate. We're on the plate, we're in a very safe place. Everything we need is there, and then we jump off. There's something in us that's somehow not satisfied with what's there, so we need to go somewhere else. So, and that is why he encouraged us to stick together as a sangha. Because when you suffer in the sangha, when you have a difficulty in your relationship with the brother or sister or the sangha in general, then you want to jump off the plate. You want to go somewhere else to try to relieve your suffering. But actually, your suffering goes with you. Because you find in that new place the same or very similar situation to the ones you discovered in the monastery or at the practice center. So can you be with the suffering instead of trying to avoid it, trying to jump away? Because the practice is a process of constant discovery of new blockages, new places where there's stickiness. You're sticking to your idea. You know, you don't want to let go. Whether it's the kind of food you eat, whether it's the kind of language you use, whether it's the kind of people you think are cool, whether it's your idea about what a proper nun is or a proper monk, and you get stuck on that idea. And because you're stuck on it, you make your younger brothers and sisters suffer so much. I am guilty of that. Because I am in my life I've been very attached to my idea of being a monk. Because I love so much being a monk, and I get so much happiness from practicing the Dharma and teaching the Dharma. And I still have a lot of suffering, but I know that this path, I'm very sure about it. Because years and years of practice have shown me that if I stay, if I'm patient, if I avoid jumping off the plate, if I can just sit there and be with whatever comes up, be with whatever difficulty comes up in my relationships, it will pass, and I will learn from it. Usually when I jump off the plate and I go and distract myself, I don't learn very much about that suffering that came up. So I miss that opportunity. So many brothers and sisters in our community, when they were leaving, deciding to go and do into another path, another form, as a lay person, I thought, if they could only stay, because this is the big one, that's the big suffering. Everything else has been kind of to prepare you for this moment when the suffering is so big that you just feel you cannot no longer live in the community and you have to go. And here you are, you're given this great gift, the big one, the big fish, the big suffering. And here you turned away. I don't want to promote hooking fish, but it's like this is the moment that you've been waiting for. And of course we're not waiting, but it's the big one. And you think, where did my happiness go? Where did my joy go? Where did my freedom go? And then you go, and you go somewhere else. And it may not be many, many years until that suffering surfaces again. And because you left, because you jumped off the plate, all you'll know how to do next time, if you haven't grown, when the suffering gets to be very big, is just to jump off the plate again. Instead of looking deeply into that suffering and seeing its nature, its roots, its ancestral roots. It's not only your suffering, but it's also the suffering of your father, your mother, your ancestors. And so, not only can you benefit from their presence in every cell of your body, but you can also transform the suffering they were not able to transform. Because that big block of suffering in you is also the block of suffering of your mother and your father, of your parents, your ancestors, of your entire civilization. There are like collective blocks of suffering. Many of us here in America have European roots, and we suffered great trauma in Europe. Religious wars. Many of our ancestors were peasants who had very little agency, and they suffered so greatly from disease, from hatred, from ideology, and we suffered so much that we uprooted ourselves and came to a new land. We thought, we'll just jump off the plate and go to another land, and everything there is wonderful, and we can begin anew. We can be the boss. Over there we are just a peasant. Let's go over to this new place and become the boss. And then if we are the boss, we will be free from suffering. And so we started bossing around our ancestors, the native people, killing, destroying, and enslaving people of African descent in order to be the boss, to grow sugar cane in places where we could not grow it because we are easily susceptible to malaria and other tropical diseases. And so we believed with great ignorance that this would relieve our suffering, this trauma we've experienced in our ancestral line. And that is just one example of tracing the trauma that is passed from generation to generation and how it manifests and continues to create suffering, not only in those who are oppressed, but also in the oppressor, even more so. And that is the insight of the Buddha, that those who create suffering for themselves and others experience more suffering. It may not look so on the surface, but it's I often remember, like here in the Americas, who is invited and who is the host? the host also always, in the end, is the one who is offering the space. The Europeans came mostly uninvited to this continent. And we brought over enslaved peoples. They didn't ask to come. They are not the uninvited ones. So there's a trauma there too. So this is kind of like digging deeply into the collective consciousness and seeing that we may be experiencing the suffering. This is my own deep looking into my ancestors to see, and in order to understand, not to persecute or blame or judge, but to understand the nature of the suffering that has been transmitted to me, so that I don't continue to transmit it to the next generations. So this is all the deep beauty of practicing the Dharma. That's why I love to practice. Why I want to use my life for this practice, because it's I cannot easily believe that there's something or somewhere else where I can touch that kind of freedom or happiness in the world, other than going inside. You can listen to a sound of the bell. And being uninvited is not a damnation, but it should help us to cultivate humility. And that is something that is part of our ancestral culture, the relationship between the guest and the host. And if you have a chance to study the teachings of Zen Master Linchi, he talks about that, the relationship between the guest and the host. And when we are the host and when we are the guest. But when we learn to be a good host, but also to be a good guest, we have a lot of humility and openness. And so that is an invitation to cultivate humility in our practice of the Dhamma, and not seek to use it to dominate or to try to be right. That is not the purpose of studying and practicing the Dhamma. It is for our freedom and the freedom of others. Okay, so last week we looked into the 8 negations, which are a teaching that has continued through many generations of the Buddhist tradition. And one great Buddhist teacher, Nagarjuna, around the 3rd or 4th century AD, summarized it very beautifully. So I wanted to go deeper into that. Last time, the 7th tenet, we studied this. There's a beautiful, very deep text called the Verses on the Middle Way by Nagarjuna, and I encourage you to study it and read it. It is upending the tendency in the Buddhist tradition to create theories and philosophies. The purpose of the practice is to free ourselves from getting attached to views It is not for the purpose of just abandoning our former views and taking on new Buddhist views. But the Buddhist teachings are there to help us to become free from all views so that we can live happily in the present moment, look deeply into what's going on, beyond signs and words and concepts. So at the beginning of that text, the verses on the middle way, there's a phrase which summarizes these 8 negations. And since we're having fun learning some Sanskrit, I'm going to write them as well in Sanskrit. So, anirodham, anupadam, anuchedam, ashashvatam. It's nice having a long word. So, in Sanskrit, at the beginning of a word means not. And nirodha is cessation. It's, when things, it's the opposite of arising, upada. So, anupadam, anirodham. So, not arising, not ceasing. Anuchedam, it means not destroyed, ashashvatam, and not eternal. So not annihilated, not eternal. Eka. Eka is one, and nāna is many. So not one, not many. Agama. It means not coming. Gam is to go. Anirgamam, not going. No coming, no going. No coming, no going. No after, no before. So Thay tried to create poetry that would express these deep concepts because he didn't want people to just make ideas about it. Just like Nagarjuna was trying to free us from philosophizing. He was trying to help us to see how at the root of our thinking we can find these 8 concepts of arising, ceasing,
annihilation, everlasting, or eternity. One and many, coming and going. For example, to come back to the image of the frog on the plate, we tend to think we have a separate self, and as we go from one place to another, we bring that self along with us. So what I am now is what I also am when I walk over there or I go to that place. With the practice, we start to let go of that concept, and we see that actually our ideas about ourselves are only that, they're only concepts. And we allow ourselves to change in every moment, allow for the possibility of some, not to hold on to this or that idea about ourselves. And so, with that insight, we also begin to look at others with new eyes. We see at every moment that person is changing, and our ideas about who they are and what kind of things they like, what they don't like, what they, who they are, where they're from, all these things can fade away, and we allow the possibility for our perceptions to change. Most of the suffering we have in our relationships are because we have a fixed idea about that person. We think that person that is like that, or that other person is like this. And we hold on to that firmly. But that person is not a separate self. They are impermanent, like a flower, like a tree, and they're always growing and changing. And yet we continue to hold on to our idea. This is that person. This is what I love about that person, or this is what I hate about that person. And so every time we see that person, we feel feelings of love, and we want to impose on them our idea about them, rather than open ourselves up to the possibility of change, of new growth, of new possibility. So this teaching on no coming, no going, Thay often used the example of a flame. I didn't bring matches today. And when he create enough conditions to strike the flame, strike a match so the flame manifests, and he would ask the flame, "Dear flame, where did you come from? Did you come from the north, the south, the east, the west, above, below?" And by looking deeply, the flame could respond and say, "Dear Thay, dear Sangha, I have not come from the north, nor the south, nor the east, nor the west, neither above nor below. When conditions are sufficient, I manifest. And when conditions are no longer sufficient, I cease to manifest." That is a direct example of the teaching of no coming, no going. We can say, the match that left the matchbox is the same as the match that's burning with the flame. But that would not recognize it's the change that has happened, the impermanent nature of it, because we have added the last condition, which is to strike the match on the striker. In a gross, obvious way, the match has changed. It begins to burn, and that burning wood material, along with the fuel of oxygen in the air, becomes heat and light for us to witness. But even at a more subtle level, we can say that at every moment, and this is the insight of Nagarjuna, at every moment there is change happening. If we recognize that there is no separate self in this body, these feelings, these perceptions, these mental formations, these consciousness. We also can recognize that in all things, that is also true. In the flower, there is, if I remove the sun, if I remove the rain, if I remove the water, the earth, then there are not enough conditions for the flower to manifest. And the flower has not come from anywhere, and it's not going anywhere. It's not coming from a seed and then going back to the earth. In every moment it is manifesting fully according to the conditions that are sufficient. If there is more rain, if there is more sunlight, that will stimulate more growth in the plant. And so the invitation is to look at every instant as a new manifestation. And that the plant that just an instant before that we saw is somehow, the change is continuing to happen. And we cannot say that that plant is the same plant as the one that was there just an instant before. And Thay called this the cinematographic nature of reality, which also applies to our mind. We perceive things in motion and moving. But just like in the cinema, there are instants of many instants which we, in our mind, in order to reduce the bandwidth of our comprehension, we blur into one continuous motion. Just like somebody who's holding a candle and they move it in a circle in the dark, and they move it quickly, it looks like a complete circle. But actually, at each moment, if you take an image, it's just one light, one flame of a candle. And so the invitation of no coming, no going is to see each moment like that. That there is we cannot say that what was over there, which went over there, is the same as what it was before it left, because it is already, there's no permanent self there. It is already changed. And so to believe in no coming, that things truly come from here and they go over there, is also at a deep level a belief in a separate self still. There's still something permanent, something that I can call me or mine or the flower or the flame that is essential. And these 8 negations are interpenetrating. So already we are talking about not the same and not different. When we ask, is the match that is now burning the same as the match before it starts to burn? And Thay would go further and take one flame and then light another match. Usually when we went on tour with Thay, Thay would buy very long matches. So whenever I'm in a store somewhere in the world and I find these kind of matches that are very long, I think of Thay. And I always buy them just to have them on hand, because I didn't bring them today, but it's helpful to have a long match that can burn a long time. But he would light the second match and then say, look at the 2 flames and say, my dear flame, this new flame, now are you the same flame as the one before, or are you a different flame? And by looking deeply, we can see that we cannot say that the new flame is entirely different than the original flame, but we cannot say that it is entirely the same either. Same and different are extremes. Looking more deeply, we can see that neither one of them can completely describe the relationship between these two flames. So the same is true of people. Yeah. I remember, Thay often gave the story of there was a couple that they took their vows to practice together in their marriage and to help one another to, if one of them is angry, not to water the seed of anger in the other person. So a kind of peace treaty that we offer to many of our practitioners who are living in a couple relationship. And so there's a kind of ceremony for that. And we also have a ceremony called the 5 awarenesses, where it's kind of like a wedding, but it's more the commitment to practice together as a couple. And so that ceremony took place in the retreat. And at the end of the retreat, Thay invited the couple to come up, and one partner said to the other, am I the same person that you married yesterday, or am I a different person? And the other answered, my dear, you are neither the same person that I married yesterday, nor a completely different person. And that is much closer to the reality of things. If we can look at our partner, at our loved one, every day with those eyes, with that insight, then we will suffer much less. We will learn to let go of our concepts, our prejudice, our judgment about the other person, and see them as a wonder of nature, a wonder of life, always growing, always changing, and we let go of our ideas of sameness or otherness. Not arising, not ceasing. We tend to look at our life like a line, and at this point, we are born, we live our life, grow old, and then at this point, suddenly we die. So, we have a simplistic idea that down here there is the realm of non-being, and up here this is the realm of being. So somehow from the realm of non-being, at some point we come into the realm of being when we are born. And then we spend a lot of, actually very brief time overall in the realm of being, and then at some point we go back into the realm of non-being. So we say that we have a birthday, and we also have a death day. And on the birthday, from non-being, we come into being. And on the death day, from being, we go back into non-being. That is, for most of us, that is our fundamental way of looking at birth and death. But when we look more deeply with the eyes of interbeing, we see that every aspect of this body is from the earth, from the sun, from the rain, from ancient supernovas, the heavy metals in our body and the earth came about because of the immense pressures and heat generated from the explosion of ancient stars. And that material is in every cell of our body. And this body is only one of many manifestations of that material. And that is only at the material realm. At the realm of feelings, we know that the feelings that we experience are a continuation of the feelings in our mother, our father, our ancestors, going back to something like a monkey, something like a fish. Those are ways of responding to certain situations that have continued and been passed down in order to keep us free from fear, free from danger, from difficult situations, from being eaten, and so forth. The same for our perceptions, our mental formations, our consciousness. These are all also coming from the collective. We have a collective fear, and fear can travel like a wildfire through the collective consciousness. And we can get fear if we're not careful how to take care of our mind. We allow the fear from the collective consciousness to enter our consciousness. And so and that fear is also existing in the collective consciousness, sometimes over many, many generations, thousands of generations. And it continues to manifest in different forms like a flame. So all of these things are what we are inheriting in the present moment. And those things have never truly been in the realm of non-being. They have continued to manifest since beginningless time. That is the insight the Buddha had. So he said that if we look and we take this body, or we take things and we try to separate them from the rest of reality, then it looks like there's birth and death. But if we go deeper and we look with the eyes of interbeing, we see that this fear that I experience today has not come from the realm of non-being. From nothing, it seems like from nothing it becomes something. But actually it is already there in a seed form. It's just not directly perceptible. Just like the cloud that never dies, right? That becomes a rain, as we already learned many times. It's just so helpful as an image, so we keep coming back to it. The cloud becomes the rain, becomes the river, becomes the ocean, and then evaporates again and becomes a cloud. But on the surface level, it looks like the cloud is being born by the evaporation and then dying or disappearing as it comes down as rain. But if we see that it's only a change in form, then we no longer have the fear of losing our cloud. And so the same is true with this concept of birth and death, arising and ceasing. When we look deeply, we see that the non-arising and non-ceasing nature of all things. It means that nothing is lost. Everything just transforms, including this body, these feelings, these perceptions, and so forth. And so then we can get rid of this artificial line between birth and death, between being and non-being, and see that by making being, we make non-being. By making arising, we automatically make ceasing. If we remove our concepts of arising and look more deeply and see that there's only transformation, then also the concept of ceasing disappears. And with it goes our fear of death, our fear of this body dying. We see that every moment is this transformation. And when this body is born from the womb of our mother, and when it goes back to the earth, actually at every moment our skin cells are going back to the earth, our cells are dying. Actually, Thay often said we don't have enough time to have funerals for all the cells that are dying in our body. And that's very true. It's this whole ecosystem of our body, kind of biome, is constantly being born. And biologists say that from one of our legs up to about the knee, all the cells that are in that part of our body are all the cells we can truly call our human cells. The rest of our body is just all kinds of other things, bacteria, fungi, the many things that make up the ecosystem of our body. But because we have a very simplistic way of looking at things, we think, oh, this body is me. But actually, we are an ecosystem. And we are interacting with each other through facial expressions, through vocal language, through consciousness. And so it's not true to say that, to just fall into looking at things at the surface level and say this body is something separate from this other body. And so Thay often said, Thay didn't have children, blood children, but Thay has many spiritual children. They are born from Thay's teaching. And when we listen and practice the Dharma, we become a continuation of Thay. Because Thay is not in this body, in those feelings, in those perceptions. Thay is the Dhamma. That is the nature of it. Remember the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, the putting in motion of the wheel of the Dhamma. That cannot be, the Buddha said, I have put in motion this wheel of the Dhamma which cannot be stopped by gods, men, devas, asuras, gandharvas, any kind of being that you can imagine cannot stop this Dhamma wheel. It is continuously going on. And if we are open, we can receive the Dhamma and allow ourselves to practice it. And then we become a continuation of the Buddha. And that is, the Buddha didn't say, I invented this Dhamma. He discovered what was already there. He said he's like clearing away a path for others to follow. It's very interesting. The Buddha didn't say, I came up with this idea, and now it's so great, and I'm going to tell it to everybody. He said, no. This Dhamma is already there. All I did was help clear away the brush. And there are other Buddhas, there are others who realize the Dhamma, but sometimes they didn't, clear it so clearly for others to follow. And so he did his best to use words, use his physical actions, his thought, in every moment to try to create a clear path for us to follow. But it's up to us to follow it and to allow the Dhamma to come in. And that is a beautiful example of no birth and no death. We just, in this present moment, if we open ourselves up and then we allow ourselves to let the seeds of the Dhamma be touched by the rain of the Dhamma, then they just grow naturally. Already those seeds of compassion, understanding are already there. We just find a way to allow them to be watered by the Dhamma. So our concept of arising and passing away are also just ideas, and anuchedam ashasvatam, not annihilated and not everlasting. So we tend to go to extremes, use words like, I never said that, I would never do that, or I always do that. Always be careful with never and always. Is it really true that you never did that? You never would do such a thing. Or you always, even in our language, we have embedded concepts like annihilation or everlasting. We think that we go back and forth between something always being true or never being true, never possible. And then we say never, 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 and then suddenly, oh, there's the exception. And it happens. Like people think, sorry, it's what comes to mind right now. People think, oh, fascism is something that happened in Europe at a time. It could never happen in America. Yeah, you get kind of beliefs like that. And then when you start to see the signs of hatred, of authoritarianism, of prejudice, you look the other way because it can't possibly be happening. Your belief, your adherence to that view doesn't allow you to see what is going on around you and within you. So underneath these concepts of always and never, you have this basic belief in something always being true or never, everlasting or annihilated. So this is just so to help us to get unstuck. These 8 negations of Nagarjuna are to help us to look deeply into the nature of our thinking so that we can become free from the attachment to views. To see the real essence of our suffering, which is in attachment to our concepts and views. And we can just flow. Yeah, a lot of the Dharma is just learning how to be with what is, instead of trying to impose our views, our concepts onto reality. And so in the 8th tenet, we learn how to actually put these 8 negations that we've learned in the 7th tenet into practice, with the teaching on the 3 concentrations. So the 8th thesis, or 8th tenet. The concentration on emptiness, signlessness, and aimlessness. Help us to touch Nirvana. And the unconditioned. These 3 concentrations are called the 3 doors of liberation, because they open a way for us when we are caught in a view, caught in some attachment to ourselves, to another person, to a way of looking at things. We can meditate on the concentration on emptiness. Last class we learned that emptiness is not nothingness, it's not non-being. Emptiness is the absence of a separate self. So it is not a concept to base a philosophy on, but it is a practice. We look into all things like the cloud, and we see that the empty nature of the cloud is that the cloud is made up of the water evaporated off of the ocean, the sun which provided the energy to evaporate it, the capacity of the air to hold the water droplets, and so forth. And all of these conditions, the temperature, the right air pressure, combine for the cloud to be there, to manifest. And if I remove any of those conditions, the cloud cannot manifest. So that is the empty nature of the cloud. It is empty of, to say it is full of everything except one thing, which is a separate self. It cannot be by itself alone. And that is a meditation that we do as practitioners. So we use an example of a cloud, or the flower, or the food that we're eating. But to go more deeply, I like to turn it back to my body and see that this body is also empty. It means it's full of the entire cosmos, but it's empty of just one thing, and that is a separate self. There's no thing there's no essence that is somehow there, that can somehow, that is not dependent on anything else. Everything depends on everything else for this body to manifest, for these feelings to manifest, and so forth, in the 5 skandhas. And that is not for the purpose of ontology, or trying to prove a theory for being and non-being, but that is for the purpose of freeing ourselves from our attachment to views. So it's a meditation, it's a guided meditation that we can do with everything. You continue to practice it, and especially with those things that you feel, no, but really, there's really an essential brother Minim there. I cannot let go, or the essential brother Min An, or essential Thay, or whatever it is. And so whatever that thing is that you're most attached to, you use that as the object of your concentration on emptiness. And you look deeply into it, and you see that it is only made up of non-it elements. And then you become free of your attachment, because you see that when conditions are sufficient, it manifests. And when conditions are no longer sufficient, it will cease to manifest. So you touch the impermanent nature of it. So emptiness is the doorway into the nature of impermanence, and helps us to become free from our attachment to that thing. Emptiness, signlessness. And in Sanskrit, emptiness is, I'm going to erase this. Shunyata. And emptiness, signlessness is animitta. Nimitta is like a mark or a sign. So animitta means seeing the signless nature of things. Seeing that our labels that we put on the flower are not the flower. That our ideas, our theories about things are full of wrong perceptions. They're just vague approximations to the reality of life. So anytime of course, we can think of 1 and 1 makes 2, right? And that's helpful. It's a tool in order to understand the nature of addition. If I have one flower, I take another flower, that makes two flowers. But in a deeper sense, we know that those flowers are also just transformations of other things, and we cannot say that they are, the one flower is only one. So looking deeply, we see that it is made of non-it elements, and that it is made up of vast billions and billions of atoms, and that to talk about just one flower is a little bit simplistic. So letting go of the signs that we attribute to that one flower, we see a vastness, and we're allowing our mind in a very open, light way to allow for all other types of possibilities to manifest. Actually, everything that you need to be happy is available in the present moment. It's just that you don't see it because you're caught in your ideas, in your concepts, the sign of thing. It's functional. The human brain has a certain bandwidth, so in order to just function, we roughly estimate. That's the nature of our mind, is just to make rough estimates, just enough for us to avoid danger and to get the food and the sustenance that we need every day, and to be warm, to sleep in a dry, safe place. But more bandwidth we don't want to waste, right? We only have, so many joules of generated from the glucose burning in our cells to power our brain. And so we have to prioritize decisions all the time. That's in our evolutionary makeup. And so to reduce the bandwidth, if we paid attention to everything that's there, we would just be completely dazzled. And some people have disorders like that. They cannot, they have such difficulty to just focus on one thing. So we've evolved in nature to be able to focus, but we have a limited bandwidth. And so we make rough approximations. For example, our vision. We have in both of our eyes, there's a black spot where our retina connects to the optical nerve. And yet, we don't see that spot at all in our daily life. It's because our brain is filling in information from the periphery. When we look across the room, we get information, and that information is being filled into the black spot, the blind spot in our eye. And so it happens it happens completely behind the scenes. And so we have to use special techniques in order to actually experience the blind spot, because our brain is filling in the missing information. And so that is what we're doing all the time. That is how our wrong perceptions come about. Our brain fills in the extra information, just approximating. And then we suffer, because ultimately our brain is just creating a model of experiential, empirical reality. And so those approximations, those models in our mind, we attach to them and we think the reality is like that. And so signlessness, the concentration on signlessness, helps us to become free from those models. It means we let go of our desire to try to attain things, get money or fame, power, sex, and all those things, because our deeper wish is to get understanding. In order to do that, we need to let go of those things that drive us to grasp after outside things that we just approximate. Understanding the stock market, understanding the nature of the economy, understanding the nature of our career, understanding what kind of thing will get us into a good school. It's just a series of approximations in order to create a performance that will impress people in order to get what we want. But the concentration on signlessness then frees us from that. It means we are very sure that in us are all the conditions that I need for happiness, and I don't need to perform anymore. What I want to do is understand my mind and be free. So I let go of those signs. I don't need to attach myself to the outer form of things, the outer characteristics of things. I want to go deeper. And then I feel more free and happy. So that is the second door of liberation, animitta, or signlessness. And the last one is just as tasty as the other two. Aimlessness. Apranehita. There's nothing to attain. Nowhere to go, nothing to do. No longer in a hurry. Happiness is here and now. I have dropped my worries. Nowhere to go, nothing to do. No longer in a hurry. That is the concentration on aimlessness. There's nowhere to go, nothing to do, so I don't need to hurry. We're rushing all our lives to try to get somewhere, to get something, to attain this goal. And when we get there, we're still not happy. We want to go to the next thing, and the next thing, and the next thing, all the way until, and we waste our lives, our whole lives, and many, many lifetimes, the life of our son, our daughter, because they follow our example, because of our wanting to get that fancy car, to get that position, to get that, to go to that party that nobody else is invited to. We suffer so much, we push ourselves. And then when we get there, we're not happy. One of the young people in the Wake Up movement at the very beginning, he was a consultant for an international consultancy firm. And he was living in Dubai. And he said that the more that he lived there, the more that he discovered these special, secret VIP executive rooms that were hidden in the hotel that he was living in. And then he would discover an even more special and secret hidden VIP room, and then an even more like higher deluxe penthouse executive VIP secret suite. And he said, there's always just one more secret, more special, more VIP secret suite that I could just, if I could just know the right people, if I could just be like that good at my job, I'll get to get into that suite. I'll get to get into that room where there's, I don't know, a hot tub and fancy bars of soap and maybe lots of alcohol and, I don't know, beautiful women. I don't know what's there, but he realized that in his mind, in his mentality, it was, he had gotten to be so ridiculous that he was pushing himself just to get to these, that secret, special thing that says, I am the most important person. I am the most important person. And he suffered so much, and that's why he let it all go and he quit his job and he joined the Wake Up movement. We are responsible for a lot of young people quitting their jobs, so be careful. This concentration on aimlessness can be very liberating in very concrete ways. We realize that what we've aimed for in our life is not bringing us happiness. So in 2013, when Thay was invited to speak at the World Bank, he asked them, do you want to be, to the World Bank staffers, he asked them, do you want to be number one or do you want to be happy? You have to choose. And most of them, they want to be number one and they want to be happy. And that is true for most of us. We want everyone to admire us, to think we're the most important person. And we also want to be happy. But the reality is that the ones that are most admired, that are most loved, and They're often very, very unhappy people because they cannot get an end to the admiration that they crave from others. And there's always somebody who has more likes on YouTube. There's always somebody who has a more witty tweet that gets more views. There's always somebody. I mean, it's a concrete manifestation of a psychological process of trying to attain to be the most important. And you are there and you still suffer because you want to do even more and more and more. So the concentration on aimlessness follows naturally from the concentration on emptiness, of being no longer believing in the existence of a separate self. Concentration on signlessness, no longer getting stuck with the outer form, the characteristics of things. And you naturally let go of trying to attain anything. Even nirvana. We don't have to even touch nirvana. We don't have to go anywhere because it's already there. Thay always said, we have been nirvanized since beginningless time. We just don't know it. So it's a matter of waking up to what is already there. That is the beauty of the Dhamma. You don't have to go anywhere. You can be in a cell with just a few square meters around you and you can practice walking meditation. You can practice mindful breathing, letting go of your thoughts, your attachments, and touch freedom. You don't need to go anywhere. So that is the 8th tenet, the development of the concentration on emptiness, signlessness, and aimlessness. We'll stop here because we've gone a little bit over time, and we'll continue to look deeply into these 3 doors of liberation, these 3 concentrations in the coming classes. Thank you, dear brothers and sisters.